There's the picture here. Where is that? They keep on going in.
Okay, it's fine. Okay, good morning, everybody. Given that we are in the month of Adar Rishon, soon to be Adar Sheni, Purim is coming up, and I wanted to discuss an issue which has come up over the last 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years or so, and that is the issue of women reading the Megillah. There are women's minyanim all around the world, Yerushalayim to Silver Spring, all over the place. They have women's minyanim, which means the parts that they can do, they do. I went to one of those in Yerushalayim. There's a very famous minyan there. I went Friday night. I wasn't ready for Kriyas Torah yet. But I went Friday night, and well, no, the mechitza goes down the middle of the room, and it actually goes right over the shulchan, the bima where they were daven and laying. And a man davened mincha Friday afternoon, and then passed the siddur to the other side of the mechitza, where a woman led Kabbalat Shabbat. Beautiful, it was lovely. And the people that came to this, I mean, you had Hasidim there, which was kind of strange. But in any event, you had all kinds of people there. Beautiful Kabbalat Shabbat. And then for Maru, for Baruch, she passed the siddur back. And the guy continues down this side of the mechitza. I wasn't quite ready for women's laning, but I was in a shul in New York where they, on Rosh Chodesh, the women take a Sefer Torah out and they have their own laning. And they're, again, just for women. Again, I won't get the halakhas, but Megillah reading has become fairly popular, where women have their own minyan, not a mixed minyan, they have their own minyan to lay the Megillah. Those that have that skill that could do that. And you have these, Teaneck has a minyan like this for many, many years. Silver Spring has it, I think, other places around the country where they have women's minyanim. And the whole question is not a new question, but I want to explore it within the prism of the halacha, to look at different sources to see whether it's permissible or advisable. That's not always the same thing, for women to read the Megillah. Reading it for other women is issue number one. Reading it for men, can a woman lay Megillah in shul? For the entire shul. So there are a number of sources that I want to just read with you and go over the sources and analyze what the halacha is in the Rishonim and some of the Achronim and the contemporary sources. And also, you know, there are meta halacha questions. Everything that can be done doesn't have to be done. Are there other concerns? Are there other issues? Is a slippery slope type of thing. And how did our ancestors deal with some of these? But it's not new. The Gemara in Maseches Megillah starts us off by saying, Rabbi Yeshua and Levi, Nashim chayavos b'mikra Megillah. Women are required to, Mikra Megillah is difficult to translate, to read the Megillah, to hear the Megillah, or in the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah. We'll see what that means in a moment. Because women were also part of the miracle of being saved during in Shushan. So they were included, just like they're included in Pesach. They were included in the miracle of Purim, so they have to also hear the Megillah. Rashi, in a different Masechta, takes us one step further, and Rashi certainly reliable, but bear in mind that Rashi was interesting, very liberal in certain ways, very strict in some ways, Rashi had three very, very learned daughters who are reputed, though it's not really clear if they actually wore tefillin or not. They're reputed to have, but that's not really clear. But in any event, they were very, very learned. As a matter of fact, his Perush on Chumash was edited by one of his daughters, because until the end of his life, he lost his eyesight. In any event, Rashi in Maseches Erchin talks about the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah, of hearing the Megillah, in terms of women. And he says, Shechayavim b'Mikra Megillah, they are obligated just like men to hear the reading of the Megillah. Ukesheros likrosa ulahotzi zacharim yedei chavasa. Wow. That they are kesheros, they're certainly acceptable to lay in the Megillah and to be motzi men for their obligation. This is right. Now again, this is Rashi, certainly a reliable person, and it goes back to an earlier machlokas, which has a lot of sociological implications. The whole issue of women getting aliyahs to the Torah, and women laning even. Can women get an aliyah? Can women lay? And the Mishnah Megillah says very clearly, yes, that women can get aliyahs. But we don't do it. We don't do it because of kavod hatzibur. It's inappropriate for a woman to perform in such a public domain, which is fascinating. Kol Isha is not an issue. Nobody raises it. Nobody raises it. What does kavod hatzibur really mean? Tosfos explains to us that in those days, everybody laned their own aliyah. So if a woman gets up there and she lanes her aliyah, it'll embarrass some of the men who don't know how to lane. So therefore, not to embarrass men, they call it, quote unquote, kavod hatzibur. But here, apparently, it's not a problem, according to Rashi. Kisheros, likrosa, ulahotzi, not just for a women's minyan. They can lane in shul. Very radical statement that Rashi brings down. The Rambam, interesting, quotes the halacha that the Mikra Megillah is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, divrei sofrim, and the Nevi'im or Masakin is fine. Akol chayova b'kriyasa, everybody has to hear the Megillah. Anoshim, the Noshim, the Geirim, Avodim, everybody has to hear it. We teach our children to hear it. And he said, and this is fascinating. Everybody agrees it's a mitzvah midrabanan. It's a rabbinic mitzvah, yet, he says, all types of biblical mitzvahs are put aside in order to hear the Megillah. That's how important it is. Afilu kohanim b'avodosam, mevachlan avodosam, ubor lishmoa mikra. Even kohanim, in the middle of their avodah, the Beis HaMikdash, had to stop what they're doing and hear the Megillah.
Rashi says so.
V'chein mevachlan Talmud Torah lishmoa mikra Megillah. You're mevatel Talmud Torah.
Listen to this.
Kal v'chomer l'shar mitzvah shatorah shakulam nitchim mipnei mikra Megillah. All biblical mitzvahs are put aside to hear the Megillah being read. The only thing that you cannot put off is to bury somebody. If there's a mace mitzvah, nobody to bury him, that's the only mitzvah that you can do. Otherwise, Mikra Megillah is very, very important. Okay? That's the Rambam. Rashi, how important it is, and that Rashi is very key. Now, how do the poskim play this out? The Magen Avram, classical posek, commentary of the Shulchan Aruch, he says that, basing on some source that he has, that a woman should not lane, but she should hear the Megillah from men. The Magen Avram is writing in Poland a little bit later on, and already we know that the position of women in the Middle Ages in Ashkenaz was not to take on public functions, even though many women did throughout history. There's a rabbinical attitude that women, somehow should not be in the public sphere. And they were troubled, for example, Devorah Hanaviyah. Maybe one day we'll give us a discussion on great women in Jewish history. Devorah was a shofetet, plus being a prophet. She was a judge. And as the judge, she was the Gadol Hador, so to speak. And people came to her with shilas. And she would answer the shilas. But in order to make it appropriate within the purview of how the rabbis viewed women's role in the public sphere of society, so they said she would sit behind a mechitza and people would ask her shilas. And whether that's how it actually happened, I'm not so sure, but that's how the rabbis depicted it. The Rosh, writing in Spain in the 14th century, so he says that she can lane, but she can't be motzi men, their obligation. They have to hear from other men. And say, "Ein shmiyasim minashim chashuva ki ilu hein asman korin." Because the person that's laning is your shaliach, basically. So if a woman can't be your shaliach in that regard.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
so we know a woman can't make kiddush for a man on Friday night because they have to say the Shiur. To say that a woman is just as obligated as a man is. So if that's the case, why couldn't she lay for a man?
I'm not passing a halach here. I'm just going over the sources. Yeah, kiddush. All right.
It's an actual serious, but in theory, you should, if
Yeah.
you say it's obligated as a man, is to
In-
be able to be,
I have no problem. I mean, in theory, you're 100% correct. The Rosh quotes the Tosefta, and the Tosefta brings down all these categories of people who have are not clear if they're male or female, people who the different categories of people, whether they can lane for themselves or other people like themselves. Mostly as mino, below she'eno mino. So a person who's a half an eved, there's all kinds of categories here, but clearly women are excluded from for fulfilling the mitzvah for other people. Other women, perhaps, but not for men. Okay. Now, what does Shulchan Aruch have to say about this? The Shulchan Aruch says very clearly, "Hakol chayav b'kriyos." So everybody has to hear the Megillah: men, women, slaves, gerim, etc. And we teach our children. And whoever reads it, whoever hears it from the person who lanes, is yotze. So if I'm not laning, but I hear somebody else laning, I can fulfill the mitzvah. That's what most of us do. And you have to hear the Megillah from somebody who is also obligated to hear the Megillah. Therefore, if the Balkore is a katan or a deaf mute or a person who is mentally unfit, and you hear it from him, lo yotze. What does he leave out? Women. So he continues the next line. V'yesh omrim. There are those who say, there are some. He's not saying his opinion. Yesh omrim, shehanoshim einon motzios es ha'anoshim. That women cannot be motzi men in Mikra Megillah. And there are others, v'yesh omrim, that if a woman does lane, ima isha korah la'atzma nevareches. A woman can lane for herself. She can make a bracha. L'shmoa Megillah. Not al Mikra Megillah. L'shmoa Megillah, because she's not chayiv in the Kriya, according to this Yesh Omrim in the Ramah.
Wally,
Yes.
why is Kol Isha not a problem here?
Why is what?
Kol Isha.
Kol Isha is not a problem. It's not,
That's
it's
what
not
I'm
a
asking.
problem.
Why is it not a problem?
And again, in contemporary Jewish life, it would be a problem simply because that's people are shifting to the right. In traditional halakhic sources, it was not because she's not singing a song, She's not doing anything to cause people to have lustful thoughts. She's laning Megillah or laning a Torah. And again, in the Mishnah about laning, Kol Isha is never raised by anybody. It's not raised. It's simply not an issue in terms of laning the Megillah or laning the Torah. It's simply not, it's a non-issue. The Mishnah, yeah?
Laning the Torah will be a problem because she has to be completed and being able to get a bracha to the Torah. And since she's not, she can't lean.
Well, according to the Mishnah, she has the same obligation as a man in terms of Kriyas HaTorah. Yeah. But we don't do it because of Kovod HaTzibur. And how, again, some people think Kovod HaTzibur is, oh, it's inappropriate for a woman to appear in a public demonstration of so forth and so on. That's not what Tosfos tells you very clearly. Kovod HaTzibur means not to embarrass some guy who does not lane. That this woman can lane? It's embarrassing to the guys who can't lane. Of course.
Do it. In those days, it was, nowadays, you don't feel that way.
It's definitely a societal issue. It's more sociology than halacha. And especially today when women are doing everything that men do, the women's liberation movement filtered into the Jewish women's liberation movement in the 60s. And they took on more things upon themselves. Some things within the parameters of halacha, some not. That's a separate discussion. The Mishnah Berurah has a fascinating take on this. And the Mishnah, by the way, the Mishnah Berurah, who died in 1936, 39, somewhere around there, was very liberal in some of his approaches towards women. He was one of the key players in getting the Beis Yaakov movement started. He and the Gera Rebbe, because women were being exposed to all types of educational things, and there's no reason why they shouldn't get a Torah education as well. So he had a different perspective, perhaps, than some of his contemporaries in terms of women. So he says that even though Kriyas HaMegillah is a time-bound mitzvah says Man Grama, nevertheless, women are obligated because they were part of the miracle of Purim. And he says, where is it? He said, and of course, what they used to do, people would lane. Women didn't very often go to shul in some communities, so the husband had to go home and lane Megillah for his wife and daughters. And umiksas makomos, in some places, noagim shehem hochos beis hakneses ezras noshim lishmoa hamegillah. In some places, women actually go to shul
Tell me if the
to
sound,
hear the Megillah.
if it's muted.
And therefore, he said, he has a question. He says, I'm not so sure that's a good idea.
You can tell us.
Ein yotzim sham nashim. Why is he afraid that women may not fulfill the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah in the Ezras Nashim? The efshar lishmoa sham kedin. Because it was, now, either, not that it was noisy, but you have to understand what the Ezras Nashim looked like. Ezras Nashim very often was a separate room connected maybe by a window or a balcony far away. And if you can't hear, then what's the whole purpose of coming to the hymn? Better you should go home and lay into your wife and daughters at home. Okay. Now, what about women? So he says, it's not like Hanukkah, but it's like Kriyas HaTorah, he says. And he pulls out the Kovod HaTzibur card. Okay? And we say low plug because since women can't lane the Torah, therefore they shouldn't lane Megillah either. Even though she might be obligated just like a man. Maybe. But if she does read, quotes the Magen Avram, she shouldn't read for herself, but she should hear it from men. However, if there's nobody to lane, she can lane Megillah for herself and actually make a bracha, but the bracha is Lishmoa Mikra Megillah, not Al Mikra Megillah. So he's not all the way in the lenient court, but he said a woman can lane for herself, which is a big departure from traditional poskim. Again, the Korban Nesanel is quoted by other poskim that say that it's just for women lanes, it's zila milsa. It's totally inappropriate. But nevertheless, even though women are obligated, however, he says, where is it? She can lane, she can make her own bracha for herself. All right, so you have a discussion whether she can lane for herself and others. The traditional poskim say she ought not to, for a variety of reasons that are what we call meta halachic reasons, perhaps. The Avadia Yosef, former chief rabbi of Israel, was much more lenient about it. There are a couple of people who bring down the whole business of Kol Isha, but he says, I have a problem with that. If they can lane and Kol Isha is not mentioned, why from Megillah you're bringing this up? And he quotes other Rishonim that maybe they ought not to lane for other people, but if they do, then they're Yotzei. And he says, where is it? So finally, the psak of Avadia Yosef in Yechavadas, he says, "Ledi done." As far as we are concerned, the Kaimalan kipsak more in the Shulchan Aruch. We follow the Shulchan Aruch that Mikra Megillah, women can lane and be motzi anoshim, and he says both poskim agree. So it's a question of what is allowed versus what you should do. So here we get involved in the sociology of halacha. The halacha might allow you to do something, but it's not considered appropriate if you do it. Now, I remember, many years ago, one of my daughter's friends, very religious girl, said she wished she could wear tzitzis. She wants to wear tzitzis. She'd feel closer to Hashem if she could wear tzitzis. But she knew if she would wear tzitzis, and it became known that she wore tzitzis, I don't know how, but if it became known that she wore tzitzis, she wouldn't get a shidduch. So she didn't. But the feeling was there. I mean, she married a Rebbe and everything's fine, no problem. But the point is that there are many women who feel more spiritual by doing things that women that putting on tefillin. There was a whole to-do at SAR a number of years ago when they allowed, and at Ramaz, when they allowed women to put on tefillin, girls put on tefillin in a separate minyan. There was a whole to-do about that.
It's very
Is it
recently.
permissible?
Wasn't
Generally
that long ago.
speaking, the halacha would say no. That women should not be putting on tefillin. Yes.
I have a question. This whole thing with the, well, that's worded. You know, technically, women may read Torah, and it's not a Kol Isha thing, it's Kvod Tzibur.
Right.
With all due respect to the males in this room and the males in this world, why is it more of a Usha for a man who can't read Torah to hear a woman read Torah, as opposed to all the men that sit at multiple times in their lives, if not weekly, listening to someone lame of the same sex as they are, but they're still not capable of reading. It's really almost like in one way, a pachim panam to the women. It's like, oh, a woman can read. You know, what is she second? She is a second class citizen.
But that's exactly what it is, because of male insecurity. Because
A lot of things we're subject to because of male insecurity.
100%. I agree 100%.
It goes back to the fact that in the old days, women were not expected to learn anything.
That's right.
They were, until Beis Yaakov came, and that was radical innovation. Women were expected to, stay home and learn from their mothers how to take care of their kids, and that was all they did. Nowadays, and women do learn, we have schools, they learn tomorrow even. How's it embarrassing for women to learn?
You never had schools for girls. Girls never went to school. They learned from their mothers. And maybe those that were really wanted to learn, they would get a copy of the Tzena Rena, which would bring down Midrashim on the Parsha in Yiddish. All right, but formal education was very, very rare for women.
But like nowadays, since there's so many rabbis through the years that have come out with new decisions and modifications on halacha or whatever you want to call it, to enable, women, yoetz and halacha and all these other things. So again, in terms of the Torah reading, I think it just isn't, it should be just as embarrassing. It should be embarrassing at all. Everyone has his or her limitations. You can't read Torah, you can't read Torah regardless of sex you are.
Rav Soloveitcher was very, very insistent on the language that we use. The halacha doesn't get modified. The halacha is. But our job is to determine what is the halacha. Okay? Rashi apparently had no problem with women reading the Megillah. Many Rishonim agreed, but many were opposed. We could do a whole discussion on the effect of sociology on halacha. It doesn't change the halacha, but it changed how people viewed the halacha, and people made decisions based more on sociology than on halacha. And so what we're left with today, given the fact that we're now in a modern period where women are doing more and more things that they never did before. So question number one, in the Orthodox world, how appropriate is it for women to learn Megillah? The fact that they're allowed to, I think, is a foregone conclusion, even though there are some who would say no. Halakhically, women may learn Megillah. Machlokas, whether it's just for other women or for men as well, that's a machlokas. But clearly, and there's also a halachic discussion on the bracha haraves riveinu that you read after Megillah. Can women make that bracha or not? That's a separate technical discussion. But putting that aside for the moment, there are two schools of thought. Somebody asked Soloveitcher, apparently, what about women reading the Megillah? And the Rav said he didn't like it. But he could find a leniency, which somebody took to mean that he could do it, or she could do it. He didn't like it. So what does that mean? Huh?
Do you say why?
The Rav doesn't do that. The Rav, so you have to understand, Rav Soloveitcher was not a posek. He was a Magid Shiur, he was a Rosh Yeshiva. He asked the Rav how to describe himself, said, I'm a Malamed. I teach, right? And there's only one psak halacha that he ever gave in writing. The only psak he ever gave in writing, and he had Reb Chaim Heller co-sign it with him, was that it's better to stay home on Rosh Hashanah and not hear shofar than daven in a shul without a mechitza. That's the only psak he ever put in the writing. I mean, he answered questions all the time, but he was not a posting. He was a Rosh Yeshiva. He was a Rebbe. He would teach. And he did things for himself that he wouldn't possibly for other people to do. He had certain heterim that he observed for himself. He had certain chumras that he did for himself. And people watched him very, very, when you have a Rebbe or a Rosh Yeshiva, you watch what he does. You watch how he behaves. And you see certain things. Like I when I went daven with the Rav, I noticed he put his talis over his head for Baruch She'amar, and then he took it off, and then he put it back on again for Yishtabach. Because Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach like bookends. That was his thing. You watch, you learn from other Rosh Yeshivas. Many minhagim I can describe that I've seen people do that make a lot of sense. He could give you 10 arguments on this side and 10 arguments on the other side. The Rav would go on a clock but nothing to when you give a shiur. 3-hour shiur went by like that. But somebody was at Rebbe, the boys have to go to college. You can't keep on going. Yeah, I know, but he's struggling. So it's okay, I'll finish it tomorrow. And the next day, 3 hours go by. And he still didn't finish understanding this particular Tosfos. What could I do? I said I would finish it, and I didn't finish it. So he says, boys, I'm sorry, you're gonna be late for class today. Bring in Rabbi this and Rabbi that. He brought in a bezdin, the three rabbanim, to be matzah neder. He said, one day he gave a shiur. There was a rush on Psachim about whether you need lishma for matzahs. A whole very technical discussion. And again, hours and hours go by, and he came out with a psak that yes, you do need lishma for matzahs. The next day, he says, I was up all night long. I wasn't happy. So went back to that rush again and came with the exact opposite conclusion. So again, the Rav was not a posek in that regard because he could see so many angles of every question. But clearly, you have 2 points of view. You have one point of view is saying it's permissible for women. The extreme leniency would say she can lane for men too, but that's generally not accepted. Women can lane for other women for Megillah, and many places do. The only problem is Barov Am Hadras Melech. There's an aspect of Persume Nisa to Mikra Megillah, publicizing the miracle of Jews being saved. And you can't accomplish that necessarily in a small minyan. Okay, we call women a minyan, but a small group of women. So based on the Rovam Hadras Melech, it's probably preferable, even though it's permissible for women to lane for other women, it's probably preferable for them to hear it in shul where there's a bigger crowd. If you're located in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody to lane, that's a different situation. But in most communities where there's a shul and there's a big minyan, it's preferable because of Rovam Hadras Melech and Pesume Nisa aspect for women to hear the Megillah read in a shul. Yes.
2 points, Bobby. Number one, you said about following a Rav. I heard this story about salvation. They asked him a question about understanding the Kriyas Torah. So he says, no, you have to understand the brothers.
Right.
So they said, Rabbi, how come you stand up? So he said, because I have a bad back.
He can't keep on getting up and down. Exactly.
You don't understand the reasons why.
Exactly.
The other thing is, I heard this from Rabbi during this multiple times. He said, listen, you have a horse, you have a swift road. It's hard for you to talk. On Friday night, there's no reason why your wife can't make kiddush from the both of you.
Absolutely.
He said, if you have company in your house, right, there's a whole bunch of people, and there's no reason why your wife should make kiddush. You really should. He said, he used the word sneakers. That was what Rabbi used. I'm just conveying what he. I went
to a minyan in New York. It's a regular minyan, where although the women did go out for it was Rosh Chodesh, so the women went out to their own laning. And then after the minyan was over, they had kiddush, and a woman made kiddush. And my wife thought I would freak out, but I did. I answered amen, and I had kiddush because women can make kiddush. But yeah, it's not a problem. The same chiyuv. Okay, so but here is again, and this is a whole separate inyan of the sociological aspect of the application of the halacha. You know, what is considered, and this depends. In certain places, you're right, it would be sneaks. Other places where women are more active in public roles, it would not be an issue. Women do. It's the same thing. If you have can a woman be a president of a shul? All right, and there are some people say there are halakhic barriers to that. I personally don't think so, but putting that aside, but even in those shuls where a woman is the president, so very often she'll make her announcements from the other side of the mechitza sometimes. Now, if she makes the announcements after davening is over, there's no reason why she can't get in front. Sneeze, whatever. So these are all questions that come up now. The original question was asked, Rabbi Tendler, asked Moshe, his father-in-law, many, many years ago. He was involved in an organization of Orthodox Jewish scientists. And he asked Moshe, can a woman be the president of this organization? Can a woman be a president, be a public face of it? And so there was a whole discussion which fits into the whole question of women being shul presidents, occupying public positions, and so forth. It's all based, and I'll finish with this. Sometimes the halachos are based on mistakes. The Torah says, "Some tosim olecha melech." Make you can appoint a king if you want. All right. The Medrash, this is the Sifri, which is the halachic Medrash of the Torah, says melech velo malka, that there should be a king, not a queen. Okay. The Rambam, without a specific source that we can locate, unless it's in the Mishalmi or something that Chuvas Agon that nobody has anymore, the Rambam adds an extra couple of words. In Hilchos Malachim, he says, Melech velo Malka, and similarly, V'chein l'chol mesimos b'Yisrael, for all appointed positions in the Jewish community should be male, not female. He adds those extra words. Melech velo Malka is what the Sifri says, and then he adds, and all other communal positions. Again, not trying to interpret it sociologically. He lived in a Muslim country where women kept inside, and then were seen, not even seen, forget about it being heard. All right. Fast forward. Before the printing press, how were manuscripts preserved? They were copied. You know, to have a Gemara was a very expensive proposition. You got to slaughter a lot of goats. You got to process the hides. You got to hire a sofer. The fact that all the Rambam's works were known throughout the world before he died. It's a tremendous. That's just how important it was. That people spent a lot of money. Now the same thing is true of Midrashim and Gemara. So there was a sofer, a scribe somewhere, who was copying over the Sifri. But he had in mind the Rambam. So when he copied the Sifri, he said, Melech v'lo Malka, v'chein l'chol mesimos. He added the Rambam in the Sifri. It's not part of the Sifri of the early Medrash. And if you look in critical editions of the Sifri, the Vilna Gaon and the Bach and others pointed out, this is not part of the original text. But once it was printed up in the printed editions of the Sifri, it's there. So all those who are opposed to women occupying positions of authority in the Jewish community, such as shul presidents and so forth, quote this Sifri. The only problem is the Sifri didn't, you can't give it, but it's in print. Now, it was so fair. It was a mistake. And but most people, most people, when they are quoting a halacha or quoting a text, don't bother go to manuscripts. They don't go to critical editions. If somebody published it, it must be true. And we know today you can publish anything. Chaim Soloveitchik, the Rav's son, is an historian. He only quotes manuscripts, which is why it's very hard to check any article that he writes, because you have to sit in the library where the manuscripts are, because he doesn't trust any printed text. He goes to manuscripts, and it's very important. I was doing a research paper on something totally different in the seminary library. Professor Finkelstein was in the next table, looking at another manuscript. In any event, and I came across a manuscript that I was working on, which wasn't what I was researching, but it contradicted a major historical point that Professor Zeitlin had written his PhD on. He was assuming that nobody would go back to the manuscript and check it. So I wrote an article showing that he misinterpreted a key manuscript. The editor of that particular journal refused to publish the article because Zeitlin was his Rebbe. And he gave me a hard time in my doctoral orals about that. But manuscripts are very important. So women in the Jewish community have assumed much greater significance than they have in the past. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only question is, it's not a question of whether women may read the Megillah. I think it's settled that women may read the Megillah. And according to a number of poskim, they may also read it for men. However, given the fact that there's a Persume Nisa element of Mikra Megillah, it should be read in shul. Again, now, whether the women can be the one to read it in shul, that is an open question. Probably yes, but I don't see it happening. But women's minyanim from Megillah do exist. How they get around the Rovam Hadras Melech, I'm not quite sure, but hopefully this will illuminate the whole role of women in Megillah. Yeah.
This goes back to over 40 years ago. In Staten Island, by Jay Marcus.
Yeah.
Used to have rules, Megillah reading. And he allowed it in the same shul. Like, and women only that very, very big crowd.
Okay, so if you have a big crowd, then you qualify for the Rovav Hadras Melech. So then that would be a very good solution to the problem.
Wally,
Any question? Yes.
and Renat, the women, the previous president was a female. She spoke in the men's section. She
Spoke
came
in-
out, she spoke when she made Shabbos.
Well, because davening is over by that time. There's no reason why not.
I'm not questioning
Although-
Rabbi Adler, I'm just saying.
Yeah, but there are those in the Orthodox Jewish community who would insist on separation even in non-davening situations. Like at weddings, for example. I mean, what better time for people to meet other people and make shidduchim than at a wedding and have separate seating, which prevents this from happening, which is a big problem, in my opinion. Any other questions or comments?
The Rav felt very strongly it should be, and I think Rabbi Feinstein also.
Yes.
It should be
Rabbi
mixed seating.
At Moshe Feinstein's children's weddings, there was mixed seating. And somebody asked his son, or David Feinstein, a number of years later, why don't you publicize that fact? And he said, I don't want people picketing my house. But his wedding was also mixed seating. I know. This is our Unzera Yidden, what can I tell you? Okay, there's no other questions?
It's the best place to meet make a shidduch. You can't meet-
Absolutely, absolutely.
Stupid.
Which is what
Have
Rav
a
Soloveitchik felt very
Have
strongly.
have a great day.
Rob Wally, Hershon's 2 cents.
Yes.
Barovam doesn't seem to exist at the Kotel.
The Rov, what does that mean? It doesn't just.
Barovam, because there's
Oh,
40
oh, oh.
minyanim.
All different minyan, that's correct. No, but that's a practical matter, because it'd be very hard to have one minyan there. Well, on Yom Tov, by the way, they do have one minyan there, especially for Birchas Kohanim. They do have one minyan. They try that. But everybody comes at a different time, so they make their own minyan. But
People
you're
come
right.
at different times, everybody's got their own nusach, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. But,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, what people do versus what they should do are two different things. Okay, anything else?
Have a great day.
Have a wonderful
Okay.
day.
You too.
You
Okay.
too, Jules. Thanks.
Take care, Jay.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
He shem roch betov yad olam, b'shus kol b'suvim kan, v'rech shechal mishalo, v'rech shechal mishalo, tzvach hayinu, v'rech unos ilechem l'chol basot, kilo chasot, u'tvo agadol shal midochas. Ki hu ezon afanes lakol mitim, matzon l'chol b'yosov, asher baro, v'rochato Adonai, hazon es hakol. Baruch atah Adonai al haaretz v'al hamazon. Uvenei Yerushalayim ir hakodesh mei Rabbi Yameinu Baruch atah Adonai v'nei barachamo Yerushalayim. Amen. Shalom tov v'mikol tov v'yolam ha'yichasreinu.
Thank you.
You were feeling well this week, is it?
Yeah, yeah. It was under the- Tomorrow, we're not having anything here. I'm looking for someone to give a class tomorrow. Actually, Sam, Rabbi Markowitz is away. Sam was supposed to give the class on Monday, and then the last minute couldn't make it.
Is it gonna be a breakfast tomorrow?
No,
No.
gotta have something initial.
Yeah, well, that's what I see. All right, sure.
Okay, back.
Monday's my discussion. Can I sponsor breakfast or you have
Sure.
somebody?
I just have to find out from Yadash. Let me just double check with him. Because sometimes he doesn't want me to come in on Monday.
Okay, no problem.
But I'll ask him and I'll send you an email and you give me the information.
Very good.
Okay,
As I
thank
said,
you.
I'd like to do it in person, but at some point, I have another thing. I've got to finish preparing it, but I'd like to give a talk about Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, the first and last chief rabbi of New York. So if you got